Welcome to the debate. Today we are turning our analytical lens toward a piece of scholarship that really challenges the fundamental axioms of the morning meal. We are dissecting the white paper on the art and science of eating Cocoa Pebbles with Pepsi, version 2, authored by Stephen Yee and dated April 2018.
It is a text that, well, it certainly demands a response. We're looking at a proposal that seeks to replace the traditional lipid-based solvent of cereal, which is, milk, with a carbonated high-sugar beverage. It's a bold proposition, a very bold proposition regarding texture, chemistry, and just the mechanics of eating.
Precisely. And the central question we're grappling with is this. Does the substitution of Pepsi for milk, as outlined in the Yee protocol, does it represent a legitimate culinary evolution that enhances texture and accessibility, or is it a flawed methodology that really compromises the integrity of the meal through inefficient mechanics and chemical instability?
It's a battle between tradition and, frankly, radical experimentation. It asks us to abandon the safety of the bowl for something much more volatile.
Well, I'll state my position. I stand with the author, Mr. Yee. I believe this white paper outlines a sophisticated art and science that solves the viscosity problem inherent in dairy and elevates the whole sensory experience through carbonation. It's about precision.
And I, respectfully, must take the opposing view. While I appreciate the attempted innovation, I find the protocol deeply impractical. It relies on an extreme, maybe an unmanageable sweetness profile. And, more than that, the strict spoon pour technique that it necessitates, it just indicates a fundamental failure of the liquid to act as a proper cereal binder.
All right, let's begin with our position statements then. I want to anchor my argument in the concept of accessibility and sensory precision. The white paper explicitly states that Pepsi is a great alternative to those who are lactose intolerant or does not care for the higher viscous texture of milk, almond, or soy milk. We often take the viscosity of milk for granted as a positive, but Yee identifies it as an interference.
Interference. That's a pretty strong word for what is, essentially the backbone of the breakfast cereal industry.
But think about it. Milk coats, it suppresses, it lingers. Yee argues that while you could use other beverages, Pepsi provides the, quote, best combination in taste overall. But more importantly, he frames this not as a passive act, but as a discipline. He writes that it takes years of experience to master the art of eating Cocoa Pebbles with Pepsi. I mean, this isn't a casual snack. It is a transformation of the eater into an artist and connoisseur. So my position is that the Yee protocol offers a kind of higher resolution dining experience for those willing to develop the skill. It treats breakfast like an active sport, not just a passive intake of calories.
And my position is that the protocol mistakes difficulty for quality. The text warns that, and I quote, it would really help if you have a very, very sweet tooth. That repetition of very, using it twice, is, well, it's alarming. It suggests a lack of balance in the flavor profile that could just overwhelm the subtle cocoa notes rather than enhance them. But my primary objection is structural. The methodology requires you to pour a small amount of Pepsi on the spoon for every single bite. This destroys the efficiency of the bowl as a vessel, and what's more, the author himself admits that incorrect mixing results in a bowl of mush almost immediately. I mean, that proves the mixture is inherently unstable. If your solvent destroys your substrate on contact, you don't have a meal. You have a chemical failure.
I think you're conflating volatility with failure, but let's dive into the core debate. We have to start with the physics of the liquid itself. So, topic 1, the viscosity versus carbonation trade-off.
Right. The text makes a very specific claim about the viscous texture of milk being a negative.
It does. Viscosity in fluid dynamics is essentially a measure of a fluid's resistance to flow. Milk, being an emulsion of fat and protein, has a thickness. It films over the palate. When you drink milk or eat cereal with it, you're coating your tongue in a layer of lipids. Yee is suggesting that for the true connoisseur, that coating action dulls the sensory reception of the cereal. It acts as a kind of mute button on the flavor profile.
A mute button? I would call it a harmonized button.
I have to disagree. By removing the viscosity, by switching to a liquid with the consistency of water but the complexity of cola, you're stripping away the barrier between the eater and the cocoa pebble. You are getting raw, unfiltered access to the texture of the rice.
See, I view that barrier as a necessary buffer. We aren't eating diamonds here. We are eating sugary rice puffs. Cereal is meant to be suspended in a medium that mitigates the harshness of the sugar and the dryness of the grain. Milk provides fat and protein to counterbalance the simple carbohydrates. Yee's proposal just removes that counterbalance. He replaces a soothing, neutral buffer with an acidic accelerant.
But look at what he replaces it with. The text is quite lyrical on this point. He writes, quote, "Feel the crunchy texture of the cocoa pebbles, and the carbonation in the Pepsi really enhances the palate with the tiny bubbles popping on your tongue. This is the crux of the science aspect he refers to. Milk is static, it's inert, it just sits there. Pepsi is dynamic, it introduces a tactile element, effervescence, that dairy simply cannot provide."
I'm just not convinced that effervescence is a net positive here. We're talking about cocoa pebbles. They are rice-based, light, airy. They already possess this delicate, crispy architecture. So if you introduce tiny bubbles popping on your tongue, are you not creating a sensory competition? You have the crunch of the rice and the pop of the gas. It sounds chaotic to me.
It's a symphony, not a competition. Think about the fatigue of eating a large bowl of cereal. We've all been there. Usually, by the halfway mark, the texture is monotonous, the flavor is uniform, the carbonation acts as a scrub, it cleanses the palate between bites. The bubbles literally lift the flavor compounds off the tongue, refreshing the mouth for the next spoonful. It prevents flavor blindness. It forces you to notice every single bite.
Or it creates sensory overload. And we have to talk about the chemical pairing. You have the acidity of the phosphoric acid in the cola reacting with the cocoa. Milk is alkaline leaning or neutral. It neutralizes acidity. Pepsi adds to it. The text mentions the intricacies of the flavor, but I fear the carbonation would just mask the cocoa, not enhance it. You're getting a sharp, stinging sensation from the bubbles that distracts from the cereal itself.
I'd argue that the stinging is actually clarity. It cuts through the sugar.
But does it? The text admits you need a very, very sweet tooth. This implies the sugar is the dominant note. You have the sugar coating of the pebble, plus the high fructose corn syrup of the soda. Without the fat of the milk to slow down absorption, this is a glycemic spike just waiting to happen. It's not just sweet, it's aggressively, almost violently sweet.
That intensity is the point. But this leads us directly to the mechanism that preserves this crunch and manages this intensity. We need to talk about the methodology, because this is where the art comes in, the spoon pour technique.
The elephant in the room. This, for me, is the fatal flaw in the Yee protocol. It is the point where the theory collapses under the weight of its own impracticality.
I strongly disagree. The methodology is the genius of the system. It is an engineering solution to the problem of sogginess.
Let's look at the instructions in the text. Step 1. Scoop a spoonful of the crispy cocoa pebbles. Step 2. Pour a small amount of Pepsi on the spoon. And then repeat step 1 until contents in bowl are totally consumed. This effectively dismantles the whole concept of cereal in a bowl. The bowl is no longer a vessel for the meal, it's just a dry holding container. You might as well just eat it straight out of the box.
The bowl is a vessel for potential. It holds the raw material. The spoon is the reactor where the magic happens.
It's a vessel for inefficiency. I mean, think about the ergonomics here. You have a spoon in one hand. You must hold the Pepsi bottle or can in the other. For every single bite, you have to perform this delicate pouring action. You have to gauge the flow rate of the Pepsi so you don't overflow the spoon. This turns breakfast into a high-stakes dexterity test.
Which keeps you engaged.
It keeps you hostage. You can't read the news, you can't check your email, you can't gesture to your family. You're locked into a cycle of manual labor. Both your hands are occupied. And imagine the margin for error. If you're using a 2-liter bottle, the weight distribution shifts as you pour. One slip and you've just poured soda all over the table.
And that is precisely why it is an art. The text says not everyone is cut out to be an artist and connoisseur. The spoon pour method maximizes control. In a traditional milk scenario, once you pour the milk, the clock starts ticking. It is a race against entropy. The bottom layer is getting soggy while you eat the top. By the time you finish, the milk is just chocolate sludge. Yi's method halts time. By applying the solvent only at the moment of consumption, literally seconds before ingestion, you ensure structural integrity for every single bite.
But at what cost? You are sacrificing the rhythm of the meal. Eating cereal is supposed to be rhythmic, almost meditative. Scoop, chew, swallow. This introduces a poor step into every single cycle. It breaks the flow, it's stop-and-go traffic in your mouth. And the reason for this strict protocol is, well, it's damning. The text includes a dire warning. Do not pour all the Pepsi in the bowl of Cocoa Pebbles cereal or you'll get a bowl of mush after a few minutes.
A necessary caution for the uninitiated.
No, it's an admission of chemical incompatibility. The author admits the mixture is inherently unstable. If you treat Pepsi like milk, the cereal disintegrates immediately into mush. This proves that Pepsi is an aggressive solvent that attacks the structural integrity of the rice pebble far more violently than milk does. Milk penetrates the starch slowly because of the fat globules. Pepsi, likely due to the acid and lack of fat, just destroys it instantly. The spoon pour method isn't an artistic choice. It's a desperate workaround for a flawed chemical pairing.
Desperate workaround is just-in-time manufacturing applied to breakfast. The author has identified that the solvent is aggressive, yes, but he has devised a protocol to harness that aggression. It's a high-wire act. The risk of mush adds a thrill to the consumption. It forces you to be present. You cannot eat this mindlessly. You have to respect the chemistry.
Should breakfast require a thrill? Should it require years of experience?
And that brings us to our third topic, barrier to entry and expertise. This is where the text moves from a recipe to a manifesto.
It's incredibly exclusive for a document about puffed rice.
Yi writes, "Don't be discouraged initially if you can't appreciate the subtleties and flavors of this art, since it takes years of experience to master the art of eating Cocoa Pebbles with Pepsi." I interpret this as a validation of complexity. We don't hand a glass of complex Cabernet to a child and expect them to understand the tannins. We don't expect a novice to appreciate free jazz. Yi is positing that this flavor profile, this interplay of cocoa, high-fructose corn syrup, and carbonation is a complex landscape that requires a developed palate.
A developed palate or a destroyed palate? Let's go back to the very, very sweet tooth requirement. That is not a sign of sophistication. It's a physiological demand for extreme stimulus. If you need the sugar of the cereal plus the sugar of the soda to feel satisfied, you aren't detecting subtleties. You are blasting your taste buds with glucose. You are numbing yourself.
I disagree. The sweet tooth is just the entry ticket. The subtleties come from the texture and the temperature. The text implies that the Pepsi must be cold to maintain carbonation. So you are managing temperature shock, acidity, sugar, and texture all at once. The years of experience refers to mastering the ratio. Too much Pepsi on the spoon, it spills or gets too sweet. Too little, it's dry. Finding that golden ratio, that is the art.
It feels like gatekeeping. When the author writes, "Not everyone is cut out to be an artist," it just feels like a defense mechanism. If you try this and think, wow, this is just wet, sugary rocks, the text preemptively tells you that the problem isn't the food. The problem is you. You aren't sophisticated enough. It insulates the theory from criticism by blaming the user. It's a classic Emperor's New Clothes situation.
But that is true of all high-skill activities. If you can't play the violin, is the violin at fault? Yi is suggesting that eating Cocoa Pebbles with Pepsi is an instrument that must be learned.
Comparing a violin to a spoonful of soda is a stretch, even for you. But we aren't just relying on my interpretation or yours. We have to look at the evidence and endorsement section of the white paper. This isn't just one man shouting into the void.
Ah, yes. The endorsements. I was waiting for this. The text lists some heavy hitters.
It certainly lists names.
The protocol was tested by Pebbles, Flintstone, and Bam Bam Rubble. I mean, these are industry icons. They are the literal mascots of the source material.
If anyone knows the structural limitations of a cocoa pebble, it's Pebbles Flintstone. She was born into this world.
I will concede that the listing of the Flintstones indicates the method has been stress-tested within the appropriate demographic, which is to say, cartoons. But let's be real here. These are fictional characters.
They represent the archetype of the cereal, and it is endorsed by Fred and Wilma Flintstone, Barney and Betty Rubble, and significantly, the corporations themselves. Post Cereal and Pepsi Cola are listed as endorsers.
Listed by whom? By the author. This is where I have to exercise some serious skepticism regarding the source's objectivity. Let's look closely at that list. Who else is listed under tested by and endorsed by? Stephen Yee, the author himself. He stands by his work. He puts his name on the line alongside the giants of the industry.
It's a circular feedback loop. He writes the paper, he tests the theory, and he endorses the result. It's essentially a peer-reviewed study where the only peer is the author in a mirror. And regarding the corporate endorsement, Post Cereal and Pepsi Cola, do we really believe these conglomerates signed off on this white paper? Or is the author inferring endorsement simply because the products exist?
I choose to interpret the text as it is presented. The inclusion of the Flintstones and the Rubbles suggests a universality to the method. It bridges the gap between the Stone Age and the modern era of carbonated beverages. It implies that if Fred Flintstone, a man known for his hearty appetite and resistance to change, endorses this, it has merit as a substantial meal.
Or it implies that Fred Flintstone has terrible dietary habits and a prehistoric understanding of nutrition. But let's step back. To me, the whole art and science claim, do you really feel that the trade-off, the loss of that creamy binder, is worth the gain in the popping sensation?
I do. I think the creamy binder is a crutch. It masks the true nature of the cereal. The Pepsi strips it naked. It reveals the Cocoa Pebble for what it is. And the carbonation provides a sensory dimension that milk physically cannot. The tiny bubbles popping on your tongue transforms breakfast from a passive caloric intake into an event. It wakes you up. The sensory input is much higher.
It transforms breakfast into a chore. And I worry about the mush factor more than you do. The fact that the text warns incorrect mixing results in a bowl of mush almost immediately suggests that the margin for error is razor thin. If your hand shakes while pouring the Pepsi onto the spoon and you spill some into the bowl,
Then you have failed the art. You must start again.
then you have ruined your breakfast. A breakfast methodology shouldn't punish you for a minor dexterity error. Milk is forgiving. If you pour too much milk, you just have more milk to drink at the end. If you spill Pepsi into the bowl, you create an inedible sludge. The risk to reward ratio is completely off. The text says almost immediately. That means you have zero buffer. It's unforgiving.
But that is the thrill of it. Not everyone is cut out to be an artist. That line challenges the reader. It asks, are you brave enough to abandon the safety of milk? Are you skilled enough to master the spoon pour? It elevates the eater to a performer.
It alienates the eater. And I simply cannot get past the flavor profile. Very, very sweet. We are taking a chocolate-coated sugar cereal and adding a high-sugar cola. Where's the relief? Where's the savory note? Where's the neutral base?
The carbonation provides the relief. The acidity of the cola cuts through the sugar. That's the brilliance. Milk adds fat, which can feel heavy. Pepsi adds acid and gas, which feels light. It's a cleaner eat, in a way, despite the sugar content.
Cleaner is a stretch. I would argue it's sharper. It's an aggressive flavor profile. And let's not forget the thermal aspect. We touched on it, but pouring ice-cold soda onto room temperature cereal causes thermal shock to the grain. Combined with the acid, I just feel that the Cocoa Pebble deserves better. It was designed to be swaddled in dairy, not assaulted by phosphoric acid.
Swaddled in dairy is exactly the status quo Yee is fighting against. That is the tyranny of the viscous. Why must the pebble be swaddled? Why can it not be liberated? Why can it not stand on its own crunch, supported only by the ephemeral pop of a bubble?
Because it's a piece of puffed rice. It needs support. It needs a hug, not a slap in the face.
I think we're reaching the fundamental philosophical divide here. I see the Yee protocol as a liberation of texture. The spoon pour method, while labor-intensive, grants the eater total agency over every bite. You decide how much liquid touches the solid. You are the master of your own crunch.
And I see it as a dismantling of the comfort and utility that cereal is supposed to provide. Cereal is the food of comfort. It is the food of Saturday morning cartoons. It shouldn't require the concentration of a bomb disposal unit just to eat a spoonful without creating mush.
Let's start to wrap this up and summarize our positions on this fascinating document.
Please go ahead.
To me, the white paper on the art and science of eating Cocoa Pebbles with Pepsi it's a visionary text. It identifies a genuine issue for a segment of the population, lactose intolerance and texture sensitivity, and proposes a radical solution. The spoon pour technique, while demanding, transforms the act of eating into a disciplined art form. The combination of the crunchy texture and the tiny bubbles popping offers a heightened sensory experience that milk simply cannot match. It is a valid, scientifically supported escape from the standard viscous breakfast. It dares to ask, can we do better?
And my conclusion remains one of skepticism. While the carbonation argument is novel, the mechanical labor required to pour Pepsi onto individual spoons renders the process inefficient. The text's own warnings about the bowl of mush reveal that Pepsi is a poor binder for the cereal. Furthermore, the requirement for a very, very sweet tooth suggests an unbalanced flavor profile that favors sugar intensity over any kind of culinary nuance. I believe this method remains a niche curiosity for those with extreme sugar tolerance, rather than a viable evolution of breakfast. I mean, at the end of the day, it creates more problems than it solves.
And yet, we must agree that the text successfully challenges the status quo. It forces us to examine why we eat cereal the way we do. Is it because it is best, or just because we have always done it?
That is true. I will never look at a bowl of Cocoa Pebbles the same way again. I may not want to pour Pepsi on it, but I do appreciate the audacity of the suggestion.
And ultimately, the author leaves it to the listener to decide. Are you willing to put in the years of experience to become a true artist of the medium, or are you content with the viscosity of the past?
A question only our listeners can answer for themselves.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the art and science of breakfast.
It's been a sweet, carbonated journey.
We'll see you next time on The Debate.